When we came out of Division 1, I know we were at a crossroads. And it was almost like childhood had finished and it was adolescence. And having to go from a single team, single project focus to a two-team studio. So we ended up with Avatar on one side, Division 2 on the other. And having to deal with those two core teams and the organization of a smallish studio around two teams is something that we had to get used to. So there are parallels in terms of the sort of fake confidence that you need to project that, yeah, of course we can do Avatar. Of course we can do Star Wars at the same time, no problem. How do we do it?
Massive Entertainment has quickly become one of Ubisoft's most prolific studios. After the team's breakout success with The Division in 2016, they have released 2 massive projects and are on the verge of launching their biggest title yet, Star Wars Outlaws. This is the first Star Wars game in over a decade that isn't published by EA, and the team hopes to deliver something unique while simultaneously leaving Massive's mark on this beloved universe.
Let's say I can feel a bit of pressure. It's impossible to not have that in mind when we create content.
I like to think of it as some ratio of responsibility and excitement.
With the game only weeks away from launch, we flew all the way to Malmö, Sweden to hear firsthand how the team are handling the pressure of such a huge opportunity, the importance the studio places on its culture, and how Massive Entertainment has gone from developing RTS games nearly a quarter of a century ago to now handling the biggest sci-fi franchise in the world. Our visit began as a standard preview event, something that often feels a bit buttoned up with harsh lights and game art backdrops, the tried and true press tour. Tension and excitement were palpable during the event, but thankfully we were welcomed into Massive's studio and were able to see not only the team making Outlaws, but the heart of Massive itself.
Every single game that Massive has released since The Division has an enormous plaque like this that features all of the names of the developers, even if they've left. This one is for The Division, and you'll notice that a lot of the people on this plaque are still in Massive, are still on the Outlaws team. And that's something that we're incredibly proud of, is keeping people together, keeping these teams functional for a long, long time.
In an age of layoffs and uncertainty, Massive has cultivated and maintained a team of passionate, committed people. It's a sobering sight considering the headlines of the past 2 years, but also an inspiring one. Whether it's an all-new IP, an RTS from a small studio, or behemoths like Avatar or Star Wars, the consistent thread across Massive's history is the team, the people.
The biggest uniqueness, I think, is the culture of Massive. It was brought up, in 1997, when it was, founded, in a garage. You still have that feeling of that this is still a garage band. The feeling of being close to each other and working very interactive.
It went from this kind of smaller studio working on, smaller projects or maybe helping out on bigger Ubisoft projects to really grow into this bigger machine during the production of Division 1.
The team has been together for decades, and while it has cultivated a strong work culture and have become best known for their series of games grounded within a real-world locale with its own distinct fan base, they're now entering into licensed territory, and with that comes the expectations and baggage of its existing fans. Over the last decade, the reception of Star Wars has become somewhat divided, both on the big screen, to the shows, to the games you play at home. There seems to be a sense of Star Wars fatigue, something that could also be said for the open world game genre. We know what that looks like to the public and on social media, but has this added to the pressure that Massive are under?
Star Wars is part of the cultural fabric of the world. So I don't know if there is fatigue. I think there's a hunger for something new and something different that proposes a different experience. And I think that Star Wars Outlaws is pretty much the first game to embrace the the outlaw fantasy in an open world setting. The preconceptions are valid, but this is a massive open world game. And I think the Division 2 had very different open world player agency experiences versus a lot, or if not most, other open world games. And we try and have that in our DNA, a different type of approach.
We find a lot of strength and motivation and passion in the combination of what we have in our DNA as a studio, what we feel like we're good at from our past experiences with Division 1, Division 2, Avatar, which is to build. It's not just open worlds, it's very lived in, detailed, authentic feeling places.
Even with the RPG elements for Outlaws, the way we're doing it is that we're making sure that the player progression is really ingrained in characters and in the world that you're going to discover, that makes you look at the world in a different way, appreciate the world in a different way. And that's super important to you as a player if you want to progress your character. So everything that we do is trying to do things in a different way.
Thanks. I should go.
See you around, Kay.
Despite all of the pressure and scrutiny, it hasn't diluted the palpable passion within the team for Star Wars.
I can only speak for myself, but I would say in the early days, it was absolutely dominated by excitement. So I wouldn't say there was a moment where there was, doubt or fear or anything like that. It was more like, this is awesome. How can we make this game? And we knew we could deliver an open world game. We knew we could deliver a big, rich game. Of course, we've been really ambitious, and you have to adapt a little bit. But no, it was mostly excitement to explore something like this.
When I found out that Massive was going to make an open world Star Wars game, that's when I thought, I need to go there. I need to be part of this team. It's always been a dream of mine to work on a Star Wars title. And having that opportunity for me was like a dream come true.
I'm always driven by my passion for film, for games, for whatever I'm doing. So in that sense, I don't pay attention too much to the external factors and pressure. So like for me, I'm just always trying to create something that I'm proud of, that I believe in, and that I believe that is going to bring a fantastic experience to the players.
Passion aside, Massive had a galactic-sized obstacle to overcome. New York City and Washington, D.C. are real places. This isn't. Armed with some of the original design documents and concept art from the films, it was up to Massive to create that galaxy far, far away.
Something we had there that we didn't have starting off on Outlaws was we had a city to build from. We had a lot of reference. We could go there, you could photograph it, you could be on the streets literally, but you can't be in the streets of Mos Eisley.
Well, I think what we really try to do is not per se, use all the materials that were provided to us in a literal way, but really try to understand where they come from.
But it's very important also to feel that we are not just making something that feels like self-referential to Star Wars. So we don't want to just reference Star Wars. We want to really dig deep into the references of the time period of the original movies, what they used to get inspired, rather than just inspiring ourselves by what has been created.
So even if it were sketches, like just to try to understand, okay, the inspiration was actually this kind of animal, or this kind of location, or this kind of biome, and then trying to really tap into that as well, but then like another part of it. So for example, in the 60s, 70s design, we really looked at different things for Trailblazer, like monorails from the 70s, the shapes they have. That was the inspiration for the Trailblazer, because we saw that a lot of the vehicles of the original trilogy actually had a lot of these inspirations from 1670s, other types of vehicles, or even kitchen appliances, for example. We were looking at that as well, like, hey, this is a nice shape. That's from the same era as they actually got their inspiration for the original trilogy, and then trying to to do something new with it. So for us, it was really, you know, important to bring new things, but in the same methodology.
I think that the one big true testament was, you know, on the team and even actually in our discussions with Lucasfilm, we definitely had situations where people weren't sure if this was something we had created or if it's something that we took from existing stuff. And I think that that's like the highest grade of like accomplishment that you could probably have. It's like, yes, it's so authentic that we don't even know.
And we went back to the movies and thought, okay, production design is one thing, and that's great, and we're gonna try and get some hooks into that to make sure that we have the same sort of visual language, visual grammar there. But it's also the cinematic presentation. And for that, we developed a lens, a camera lens within Snowdrop, our game engine, that allows us to replicate the sort of lenses of the 70s and 80s. So you have barrel distortion, chromatic aberration, film grain, vignetting, all wrapped up in a ultra widescreen presentation. All of these things you can turn on and off individually, but the whole impact is one that really pulls you into a cinematic presentation.
Bigger challenge was hearing the amount of detail in the lens that we wanted to try and get, and what it meant to the storytelling to have those elements in. So it's like, okay, I get that's going to be quite a challenge to do some of those things. That's where the lens project sort of came in, because instead of just doing a few elements, we're actually going to tie it all together, which means we can do the lens breathing, which is something you can get with that kind of characteristic. It's harkening back to those original movies and how they were shot. That's why we have, you know, CRT screens, and like they've got the rusty elements, and it fits in with that whole aesthetic. So having the camera carry that on through, and that includes with things like the film grain. The film grain, it can run at 24 FPS. It runs independent of the actual game's frame rate, so it gives you that sort of grounded cinematic or filmic feel. And that's all part of bringing that whole image together. So when you go to a city, you've got the neon, you've got the arborec, you've got everything sort of setting stone, and then the camera is sort of giving that slightly wider, small distortion and slightly softer feel that you would actually get.
Your drive to create that cinematic experience, you even recommend to have it ultra onto the cinematic widescreen, right? Because you made it optional, but how does it feel that if someone goes into the game and just turns it off?
It feels a little bit like when somebody does like a TV movie where they actually just zoom and crop to 4:3. It's that old idea. So I think for me, it's more about what we think looks better. The full frame is supported. This cinematic 21:9 aspect ratio gives you that wider sort of Panavision view with the distortion further to the sides. So it looks really good, but if someone wanted to play it full frame, then that's okay too.
Massive's passion for minute details has long been their calling card, and it's just as present here as it was for The Division 1, 2, and Avatar.
The attention to detail has become part of our DNA at this point, so we put a lot of attention to detail into many things, but if there was one thing, maybe it's the little animations and facial expressions of Nyx and the way he reacts and explores the world and responds to everything that's happening.
So when you're working in a language like Aurebesh, for example, we put a lot of care into, okay, what are all these words that are written in Star Wars Outlaws?
Just the Aurebesh being completely accurate throughout the whole game, and I can't speak Aurebesh. I know there are people on the team who can. So they can look
They learned the language for the game?
Or did they already knew it.
And the artists, they also know whatever they write down, somebody, a day after, there will be a 45-minute breakdown video of a 30-second teaser trailer that came out with everything translated.
You know, you see a billboard or a sign and it is accurate. And that is the attention to detail I absolutely love on this game.
Things like the holograms are extremely specific, and I knew going in that like Lucasfilm would have a very detailed approach to what they expect. You can't just make a faint image, make it blue and say it's a hologram. There's going to be a lot of specifics to solve.
Going back to the example of the raindrops that you mentioned, that's actually something that we did back on the Division days as well, was like the sound of the rain on the tarp, on the umbrellas, like in the city. And this is something that we took even a step further in Outlaws. It's a small detail, but it's like, if you think about other games where you might just play a sound of rain, it's like a 2D sound. This gives it so much more depth, where each raindrop actually reflects which material it drops on, and and it just gives that further spatial kind of awareness to the player as well.
If you watch a cinematic or walk through Miagana and you see a hologram and you stay and watch, or you do a Fadia race, and you don't think too much about it, that just means that it's done exactly what it needs to do.
These small details are elements that will mean a lot to long-time Star Wars fans, but it's those details that could go equally unnoticed, which is all the more telling to the team at Massive and its passion for Star Wars as a whole. The attention to detail, the tech created for the sole purpose of delivering that Star Wars feeling, the care with which they're handling the core tenets of Star Wars, and the care that's gone into creating new elements of it can only be possible when you have this much passion. They are a studio that's been building to this moment. And regardless of what you are feeling about Star Wars Outlaws right now, I get it. Honestly, the thing that has made me most excited about the game, more than any trailers or gameplay, is seeing the people behind it. The passion and culture of Massive Entertainment. At the very least, with Star Wars no longer being in the grips of EA, we can but hope that Outlaws is the first of many more varied and beloved journeys across a galaxy far, far away.
And don't tell my boss, I would do this for much less money. Don't tell my boss.
Beautiful. That was